Welcome back to episode 3 of Two Peas on Pod podcast. I'm here. I'm joined with Dylan Pease once again. Pease, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Patrick. Thanks for asking. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Episode's going to come out a day late this week. We both went home this weekend from college, and then we had the Super Bowl on Sunday, so a little bit of a hectic weekend. And we decided just to record on Monday and get that uploaded tonight. So that's why it's late. Next week we should be good on Sunday. We haven't ran into any conflicts yet. If there is anything that does come up, check our Twitter. Have updates on there. So if you're wondering where the episode is, check there if there's something that went wrong. So today is the last episode before pitchers and catchers report for spring training. Next week, hopefully we'll have actual baseball to be talking about instead of just where guys are signing, what's going on. So hopefully we'll be able to get some stuff out of spring training already and have a little bit to talk about, even though I'm sure there won't be too much. But first, I'm going to start this off with a question for you. Does the MLB have a problem with so many big name free agents left that haven't been signed before spring training?
I mean, that's such an interesting question. I think that when it comes to Major League Baseball free agency in general, it's just pretty much like everything else that Major League Baseball does. It's such poor marketing. Like when you got the NBA and the NFL and like free agency starts, it's like a frenzy. It's like a whole separate season that you can talk about. And baseball, it takes the entire off season it's like you can get a signing or a big trade like a Corbin Burns trade in like the middle of January and nobody knows about it or is expecting it, and it just kind of gets shoved under. So I think that baseball could do a much better job of marketing itself with that, but like everything else they do, it's just taken for granted, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. The marketing of it's bad, and I think there's just so many aspects of an MLB offseason that go into it with so many players that are at hand. You know, you have all the 40-man stuff, you have arbitration hearings and all that stuff. And then like the winter meeting is supposed to be this time where big things happen in baseball. And I think it's kind of gotten oversold to the point where all these GMs go and meet, and it's like, great, they go and meet. But even then they're kind of hesitant to do stuff because there's so many pieces like dominoes that have to fall, it seems like, in order for anything to happen. Like this offseason, it was Shohei Ohtani, for example. Once Shohei Ohtani fell, you know, everyone was expecting this big rush of everything else to happen. And we're still left with so many big name guys that haven't signed. You have Matt Chapman, Cody Bellinger, Jordan Montgomery, kind of just to name a few of those guys. And I mean, we're 3 days away from pitchers and catchers reporting, and all those guys have gone unsigned so far. So, I mean, it's just something where I don't know what the solution is. I know Boris is one of the main guys who kind of tries to hold out his clients till the last possible second, which, I mean, as an agent makes sense. You're trying to get as much money for your clients as possible. But I just don't understand how like teams and agents are so set in stone of like the value of players that it just seems like there's no leeway, and that some guys, like, I mean, you saw Cody Bellinger last year signed not a cheap 1-year deal, but he signed a 1-year deal like to go prove it, and he's unsigned again going into spring training, and it just kind of seems a little bit extreme to me.
Well, I think that you can look at it from a broader perspective and say that like now I'm very opposed to a lot of the analytics that go on the field, but these front offices have poured much more money into player development, stuff like that, and so the value of players generally has gone down. Like, I mean, we'll talk about it later with the Bobby Witt extension, but teams are much more hesitant to chalk out money when they can develop a player for much cheaper in the minor leagues and bring him up, and he's still close to the same value.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I'm going to just kind of ask you another question here. What are your thoughts on a salary floor for those teams that, you know, maybe don't spend very much money?
No, I agree. There should be a salary floor. If you're not willing to spend the basic amount of money as an owner, sell the team, because this is still an entertaining product. And I just think I mean, these owners have plenty of money. For them to just purposely not spend any money, I think is a joke.
Yeah, I mean, but then like on the counter side, you also see kind of teams like the Rays. Like the Rays have some of the best analytic departments in baseball, and they're always like, I would say they're always a competitive team. They always get like, they suck the most out of their players, especially pitching. Like, for example, I'll just throw out a guy. Jake Diekman was traded from the White Sox to the Rays last year. He was one of the worst pitchers I've ever seen in a White Sox uniform. He was just atrocious. And he goes to the Rays and he's just a complete stud. Like they always know what they're doing with these guys. They get guys that are like good at very specific things that they know they can excel at. And it's like, why would you spend money if you're an owner for Tampa Bay? Like, it's such an interesting thing to even think about when it comes to that, because it's different than every other sport, right? Like, I mean, in the NBA, you kind of have to spend money. You have to go get stars. You either have to spend money to go get stars, or you have to sign big money contracts to those stars to extend them. In the MLB, you get guys that are very good at specific things, like the Rays do, where in the like another, once again, in comparison to the NBA, like if you have one guy that's a really good 3-point shooter, or one really good rebounder, one really good defender, like it just doesn't quite work like that when you think about team building, where the Rays just find ways that they get on base, they hit home runs, they got guys that do, pitching staff especially, they do very specific things against very specific hitters, and I mean it works out for them well. So it's just a very interesting thing I thought of real quick before, right when we got into the episode. I thought it would be a little bit interesting to talk about, but we'll get on to some of the bigger news here with the Bobby Witt big extension. He gets 11 for 288.8 from the Royals, with the potential for it to be 14 to 377. I mean, that is a monster contract. And before, I'll just bring one more point out. Only 2 teams still have not signed a player to a $100 million contract, the Oakland Athletics and the Chicago White Sox. So great company to be part of.
Well, I'm going to preface this by saying that I don't personally have a problem with Bobby Witt, and I think he's a great player. But the Royals aren't going anywhere. They're not going to go anywhere. And as a small market team, it might be in their best interest to not chalk out that much money.
I hear what you're saying. I think they have their superstar. And I mean,
doesn't matter if they do, though. Doesn't matter if they do. Mike Trout has been an angel. You don't win World Series based off of superstars unless you're a big market team and you can pay Ohtani along with Mookie and Freeman and all these other guys. As a Brewer fan, they signed Yelich to the extension. Yelich took a pretty team-friendly discount on that extension. Yelich was also should be 2-time MVP at that point. So it was much easier for the Brewers. In a winning situation, they had a winning team. The Royals don't have a winning team right now. So they're putting all this money into one player while their entire roster. I mean, I suppose they could end up trading him in a couple of years if they're still poorly run. But I just those contracts, generally speaking, the Chris Davis contract, the Miguel Cabrera. I know that those guys, it's not a fair comparison because they're older players, but generally speaking, like the Royals, they have to build up their roster, and I suppose that doesn't really matter whether they sign Witt or not, but you're just going to be wasting all the money that you have with Witt.
All right, I'm going to throw out a few things here. First, Kansas City's building a new stadium. They need guys to fill seats. Like, first, that's the first point. I think that definitely played a role. Like, you need a star like that to be able to fill your seats. Like, and I think it played a role in why they extended him. I think he's a very marketable guy in Kansas City. He's well liked in Kansas City. I think like he's a guy that they want to keep there. I think he's a guy that the fan base believes in. Everyone kind of seems on the same page with that. That's me defending the Royals. Another thing is they have a lot of young pieces around him. Like they have a very young roster. However,
that doesn't mean good.
However, this is where they have the chance to be pretty decent. Now,
No, they don't.
They definitely do. You can't say they don't have it. It's a weak AL Central. You cannot sit here and say they don't have a chance. Like, I mean, I think they will compete with the Tigers, the Guardians, and the Twins. It's a weak AL Central.
No, they don't. They're not in the class of the Twins. They're not in the class of the Twins.
The class of the Twins. I don't think the Twins have a class. They're not anything special.
What are you talking about?
The Tigers and the Royals can make a push at the Twins this year. The Twins are not.
Lineup is so much better than the Royals lineup is, and that discounts the fact that their bullpen is really good, and they've got a couple of their starting rotations above average.
Oh, their starting rotation is average at best.
And that's fine.
The Royals lineup will be just as good as the Twins this year. They have a ton of young bats in their lineup. They have a ton of young bats in the lineup. The young bats have to pan out, but you cannot sit here and discount the Royals. They have a fair shot at that division. There is no clear first place in that division, I don't think.
If you had to list the top 10 hitters between the Royals and the Twins, 7 of them would be Twins.
Right now, for sure. I'm just saying you cannot sit here right off the Royals right away because I think they have the potential to be a very good team in the AL Central. It's a weak division. I think they can be very competitive. I think at the deadline, you'll see the Royals maybe looking to make a push. I think they're going to hold pat, but I think they're going to be competitive in the division. They're not going to be 15 games out. They're going to be within 10 games of the division.
They're going to compete with the White Sox for 4th place.
Not
Is
a
what they're going
shot.
to do.
You're saying that you shouldn't even be thinking about the White Sox in 4th place. I'm a White Sox fan. They're not going to get 4th place.
You're right. They're not that bad.
But I don't think they're going to get 4th place. The Royals, the Tigers, the Guardians, and the Twins are all in the mix for that AL Central.
I don't believe in the Royals player development. You can't just bring the Rays out of the Rays, and I know that Quatarcho or whatever his name is
Matt Quatraro.
Yeah, he's from the Royals, or from the Rays, but they've got a lot of issues deep within that front office and organization in terms of developing players. You can't look at guys like MJ Melendez, watch them play baseball. He's a catcher / outfielder. I mean, they don't know what they're doing developing players.
I just disagree. I think the Royals made some moves. They got some veteran pitching. I'm not going to sit here and say that these guys are needle movers.
They got a bunch of 4s and 5s.
Like I said, I didn't say they're needle movers, but I think that they have Brady Singer. They have some young arms there. I don't think it's out of like this realm to say they're going to compete in the AL Central. I'm not sitting here saying they're going to go win the World Series. I think that AL Central is crappy. I think that division is wide open to win. I think the Royals saw that, and that's kind of why they tried to go sign some of those arms. Now, I'm not that was me defending the Royals. I think the Royals are in a very similar situation that the White Sox were in a few years ago. You look at the similarities. They have a ton of young talent. If it pans out, they're going to be great. If it doesn't, they have the 30th ranked farm system right now. They have all their young guys there. That's why they signed Bobby Witt to this extension. They're saying we are all in. These are the guys that we believe in. These are guys that we think are going to be able to contribute to the team. I think they're going to go find a free agent next year to kind of push them over the top if this year goes well and they're competitive. But I think that if it doesn't pan out, in a few years, we're going to be looking at that Royals team and being exactly where the White Sox are. Bobby Witt's their Luis Robert. That's the best way to put it. Like, they have a ton of pieces around him that could be special, but if they don't pan out, like, you'll look at it and be like, they tried to go all in and it just didn't work. But I also commend them for that. Like, I'm okay with teams like I want teams like that to go try to make the playoffs, go try to be competitive, especially when they see a weak division. So that is my perspective on the Bobby Witt. I'm still impartial because a lot of it depends on just how the team is around him. In 3 years from now, Bobby Witt could be one of the just a complete stud, but the Royals could be going nowhere because they have no farm system now, and the rest of their team just didn't perform. But then when you have him signed to an 11-year deal, you reopen that window. If he wants to stick around for a rebuild, you have the time to be able to find a second window with Bobby Witt, especially with how young he is.
So a couple of things there, a lot to unpack. First of all, when you say the name that the Royals, you're all in on teams like the Royals trying to compete for a playoff spot. They have no chance of competing for a playoff spot with that pitching rotation. None. So, second of all, you can't compare the White Sox and the Royals because the White Sox, the players they had coming up, first of all, were much more highly touted prospects than the Royals. And second of all, right off the bat, those guys came up. They won. The Royals haven't won anything with these guys yet. They have not even shown the potential. They were in a poor division last year. So where's this potential?
They were in a poor division last year, and they weren't great, but they were not terrible. They were middle of the road last year. I'm not sitting here saying they're gonna go win 100 games. I'm saying that if the division winner is 85 games in the AL Central, I don't know why it couldn't be the Royals.
You said that they were okay last year. They lost 106 games. They were in last place in that awful division.
They also had a lot of injuries.
Okay. Well, we can agree to disagree, but I'm just making a point to say that we haven't seen anything from them to make anybody think that they're anything more than competing for 4th place in that division this year. They're not even close to the Twins. I would still take the Guardians any day as well as the Tigers, and they can compete with the White Sox for 4th place.
Hey, you know where the Guardians are picking in next year's draft, right?
No. Where?
They're first.
Oh,
They
yeah,
won the
that's
lottery.
right. That's right. They did win the lottery. Yep.
Just want to make sure that we're clear that AL Central was so crappy that
They were 10 games under 500. They won the lottery. Doesn't mean they're the worst team.
I'm not saying they're the worst team. I just don't think they were very competitive. And I think that the Royals are going to be a lot better this year. I really
Wait a
like
second. No, they were competitive. They were 10 games under 500. And they had a lot of injuries. The Royals were not competitive. 56 and 106 is not competitive.
We'll agree to disagree. I like the
Okay.
Royals this year. Give me the Royals.
Okay.
I want the Royals will at least finish in the top 3 in that division.
Okay.
All right. All right. So there's our Royals talk. Gus, you're welcome. Let's go Royals. All right. Next, we'll talk about Gary Sanchez in Milwaukee with your team. 1 year, $7 million deal. What do you think? It seems like they kind of have a logjam at catcher now.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how much he actually catches. My guess is that he's just going to be DHing against lefties. And regardless of whoever the backup catcher is, it doesn't really matter because Contreras catches at least 4 out of every 5 days anyway. So I like this signing. $7 million is a lot for a player, but I definitely think they needed more juice in their lineup, and adding in Hoskins, especially because they were terrible against left-handed pitching last year. I said that with the Hoskins signing. So you add in Sanchez as well. I think it's a good move. You're now looking at pretty much Bowers and Sanchez DHing, which is, a little concerning, but it's fine. Like, I actually like Sanchez.
Yeah, so the only thing I have with that, with what you just said, is it worth having 2 bench spots with a guy like Gary Sanchez and a backup catcher? I feel like you kind of lose some of that roster flexibility where, like, I know, like, you always have to have at least one backup catcher on that 26-man roster, like, wherever you are. But having 2, I know Gary Sanchez is a really good bat, but still, it kind of seems like if he's just going to DH, is it worth kind of him? I mean, he has to have a roster spot with 1 year, $7 million. So do you now DFA a guy like Austin Nolo who signed in the offseason, or Eric Haas? Like, it just seems like the roster construction fit might be a little clunky there. That was the only thing that I see. I agree with the signing. I think he's a good bat, but and backup catcher, he's not a terrible backup catcher with his bat
Yeah.
just in general. But, like, it's just an interesting thing, I think, with roster construction, what they decide to do. I think it's going to be an interesting spring training.
Well, one of the things that the Brewers are known for is that they've got this catching coach that I guess makes catchers much better defensive catchers than what Walt McGivern or something like that. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see because, Haas can play some outfield too. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the way that the Brewers want to go, but I could see a non-zero chance that they start the season with 3 catchers on the roster. My guess is that Sanchez is just going to DH and then catch the games that Contreras doesn't catch. And I don't really think that, with the Corbin Burns money getting off the books, that, they had a little extra money to play around with. So I don't really think that they thought Sanchez was going to be a type of player they could go get. So I know that, like, Nola was a minor league contract. So I'm not necessarily sure that they're concerned about cutting bait with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I like this deal.
I agree. I just think, like I said, the only thing is the roster construction. Wasn't Contreras not a very good catcher when he got to Milwaukee, like from Atlanta?
He got a lot better. Just like all the other catchers that have gone through there,
Yeah.
they have definitely gotten a lot better. But
Uh,
I don't know. It'll be interesting. The Brewers, they signed Jacob Junis too. That was a 7-year or $7 million too. So you're looking at $14 million for Junis and Sanchez, and that, for a team that doesn't spend any money, that's kind of a lot for those 2 players. But I mean, it's nice to see them spending a little money on the margins and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye on throughout spring training. All right.
Yeah.
Now here, we're going to try a little something different. I hope this works when I'm editing this. I'm going to try to put in the picture of what we're talking about. We're looking at an athletics thing, or an athletic. They publish something with the offseason grades for every MLB team. I have a picture of all of the grades for the teams. It should be up in the top corner right now. Hopefully I did that right. We're going to kind of be talking about a few of the grades here. We both kind of picked a team that we thought was overly graded and underly graded, or undergraded, not underly graded. But yeah, Pease, we can start with you. Your overly graded team, you said, was the Giants.
Yeah, They got a D on here, so they're actually undergraded. But
Undergrad, I apologize.
yeah, no, I like what the Giants did this offseason. I don't really think it was fair to give them a D. They added Robbie Ray, which is an ace at the beginning of their rotation, especially when they're playing at their stadium. I think that's a huge pickup, especially because they were pretty much throwing out openers every other day last year. You add in Jordan Hicks, which is a much needed relief pitcher that can give them a little something different with the velocity. And then you add in Jung Ho Lee, which I know he's kind of a little bit of an unknown, but they needed a bat there because they lost Jack Peterson. And I definitely think that that's an upgrade. So, the Giants, they're still probably middle of the pack in the NL West. Obviously, they're not the Dodgers. They're probably not the Diamondbacks at this point. They're kind of battling with the Padres. But to give them a D when I think that they've pretty much clearly upgraded their roster is, I think, a little unfair.
Yeah, another thing I'm here, like when we're looking at the Athletic, they said that the biggest need, like they almost grade them off of what the Dodgers did do, which I guess I can see a little bit. Like it hurts the Giants a lot that the Dodgers went out and made those kind of signings, especially when the Giants were kind of floated around as being a name for both Otani and Yamamoto. So I mean that definitely hurts, but I agree with you when you say that a D seemed a little bit harsh for the Giants grade. I think they definitely got better in like this throughout this offseason. I wouldn't say that they made like leaps and bounds, but I think like a C or B, probably a C for the Giants would be the fairest grade I could give them. I don't know if it's quite a B, but I think definitely a C.
Listen, when you play in the stadium that the Giants play in, and you can put Robbie Ray and Logan Webb at the front of that rotation, they're built on pitching. That's the way that the Giants have been forever. And to get back to that with the kind of the two-headed monster at the top of the rotation, I think that's huge because they didn't have that last year. And Webb was the only guy they can consistently count for innings. So I think that's huge. I think that's probably the most underrated. I mean, I know that they lost Mitch Haniger, but again, the Giants aren't going to be made by who their hitters are anyway. That the way that their front office operates, they're pretty much just a big platoon anyway, and they're play the numbers and whatever. So getting Ray is, I think, huge for them.
I agree. I agree that that was definitely more of an underrated move. And we talked about this in other episodes, like the Mariners just in general, but we won't even start to dive into them. So you thought the Giants were undergraded, correct? You thought
Yeah.
that they did not quite deserve a D. We thought that they deserved a little bit better. So my team for that, I said the Braves. So on here it said that the Braves got a C grade, and I don't think it's quite warranted. I mean, I thought they had a pretty good offseason. I think they have a lot of potential with the moves they made. They go out and get Chris Sale. Like, if Chris Sale is Chris Sale, their rotation with him and what's his face, the hard throwing righty that they have.
Strider.
Yeah, Spencer Strider. I mean, those guys are two top line aces at the front of your rotation. I think Aaron Brummer is a very underrated move with the Braves defense. With the Braves defense, he was terrible with the White Sox. With the Braves defense, I think he'll be a pretty good reliever there again. Jared Kelenic that they got from the Mariners, who just seemed to start trading off guys. If they can develop him into another outfielder out there in left field, I mean, they got a ton of guys that I think are very kind of high ceiling. Like if they trust their development staff to kind of help these players develop a little bit more, I think they have a few studs that they got this offseason. Plus, Reynaldo Lopez, I heard that they were trying to use him as a starter or a reliever that they didn't quite decide. They signed him for 3 years, $33 million, I believe, was the signing that they did. And if he's like, if they can make him a starter with the stuff he had coming out of the bullpen, he'll be a very good starter. Now, if his stuff goes back to how he was before he came out of the bullpen, where he was kind of throwing low 90s with pretty crappy command, then it's like, all right, get back to the bullpen, and they have another good bullpen arm there. So I think it was definitely an interesting offseason for the Braves. I don't think they deserve to C. I think they definitely got better. I think they're looking at probably a B for me. I think they maybe a B minus, but definitely not in the C range. Probably B minus, close to a B. I think they got better this offseason.
Jared Kelenic, I think, is probably the most fascinating move of the offseason. I know part of it is because I follow Kelenic. He's a Wisconsin guy. I interned with his parents' team. They own an indie ball team. But anyway, the Mariners pretty much just gave him away.
Yeah.
So when you got a 5-tool player like that was at one point a top 5 pick, and you take him to Atlanta, which with maybe probably the best hitting development there is. And he had a much better season last year. Like 2 years ago, he was pretty much like on life support in terms of like, can this guy be a starter? And last year, I mean, he bounced back. He had over 250. So, he kind of started to, you could tell, start to figure some things out. You go to Atlanta around all those other guys who know what to do when they're hitting, and you get him with that hitting coach there. I mean, he's got like, I mean, he has all-star potential. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-star, but when you pretty much just get him for nothing with a potential for an all-star, that to me is just insane.
I agree. And like we said, the Mariners, we don't know kind of what went through their offseason because they were just all over the place, it seemed like. So to get him from the Mariners, I think he's a guy that they think can be their starting left fielder. And now you have a really good outfield with Michael Harris, Ronald Acuna Jr., and Jared Kelenic. Like, I mean, that's an outfield, probably one of the best in baseball right there.
But
So
to think of the idea, like, so just to, I hate to throw a team out there like that, but the White Sox, who are playing first baseman in right field, like, the Mariners gave Kelnick away. Like, if you're a team like the White Sox, how are you not just jumping in on that and being like, hey, we'll take him for nothing. Like, we'll stick him out in the outfield and give him every day at bats, and now your player development might not help him. Who knows? But like, if you're a team that is not a good team that's looking for taking flyers and stuff like that, how are you not taking a flyer on Kelnick?
Pease, that's way too smart of a move for the White Sox to make. Come on now. That makes too much sense. We don't do that over there.
Yeah.
All right.
Gamble
Now,
sheets.
all right, we'll get into the teams that you saw that were overly graded, that you didn't quite like their free agency as much as the Athletic does. You said the Philadelphia Phillies. They got a B according to the Athletic. What do you think they deserved? B, C, D?
Well, I don't think that they've actually added any players, so I'm not necessarily sure how they could have gotten anything higher than D. They lost Hoskins, which I understand wasn't a player for them last year. However, he was 2 years ago, and that was pretty important. Now, they did retain Nola, and they needed to retain Nola, so I'm sure that that's probably why they got the grade that they have on here. But they also lost Kimbrel, which to me is vital because the way that Rob Thompson operates that bullpen, like, you've got to have guys like that at the end of games. And you look at that division with the Braves, and David Stearns took over the Mets. I think they're going to be bouncing back in the near future. The Marlins were a team that made major steps. Like, that division's got some teams in it now, and for the Phillies to just pretty much stand pat, I think is, let's just say that I'm not sure that a B is warranted.
Yeah, I agree. I think a B was too high for the fact that they only signed Aaron Nola. However, I will give them the benefit of the doubt that I don't know if they're done in free agency yet. I think they can still kind of make a move. They're kind of known, they're willing to spend money. If they see a guy that they can kind of get on like a 1 year deal, maybe they just want like a little bit of a prove it deal and they go play in Philadelphia. I mean, I don't know if their free agency is necessarily over. That's where I'll kind of give the Athletic the benefit of the doubt. But besides that, I completely agree with you that signing Aaron Nola was not quite worth a B in my books in the division that's kind of like that. So I agree 100%. Team I picked was a little overly graded, kind of in a similar boat as the Phillies, where their offseason, for me, depends on what they do next because I don't think they can't be done yet, was the Cubs. I really liked the Shota Imana. I struggle with these names. I'm sorry. The Shota signing. I think that was a great signing. $53 million. I like it. They got Craig Counsell. I wasn't too much of a Craig Counsell fan compared to David Ross in general, which we can talk about that at a different time. It didn't move the needle much for me, and they signed him to a massive deal, which was kind of crazy. But if they don't sign Cody Bellinger again, like, it's tough to look back at that fan base and be like, hey, we were one game away from the playoffs last year and we let our best hitter walk away, but we got this starting pitching and we lost Marcus Stroman. I mean, it's kind of like they have a good farm system. They definitely have stuff coming up in the system, but to stand on your hands here just seems foolish right now. Like, you have to, if you don't sign Bellinger, you have to go overpay for Matt Chapman. And Matt Chapman's not nearly as good of a player as Cody Bellinger is. Like, even if Cody Bellinger regresses, you can at least be like, well, he had a good year here. They forced our hand. Like, we had to go sign Cody Bellinger. Like, even though he didn't have a great year, Like, you had to go do it. Now, if they don't, like, it's like, what did they go do? Like, they traded for Michael Bush, which I really liked that trade. I know I talked to some Cubs fans that were not a fan, but I think Michael Bush is going to be a good player for them. He's a very, like, he's a utility guy that can play all around the infield. I like the Michael Bush signing, and his swing is butter from the left side. He's got a really pretty swing. I think he'll be a very good player. But you have to go sign a big name if you're the Cubs. Like, I just don't know how you can walk back to that fan base after you're like, hey, we missed the playoffs by one game last year. We're looking to go compete, and you don't do anything besides sign a starting pitcher, which, like I said, I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of the moves they've made so far. It just doesn't seem like enough. And like I said, if a C is fine right now, and I think they probably goes up to a B if they sign Cody Bellinger to a pretty fair term deal. If they pay Cody Bellinger a crap ton of money, that's a little bit, but I'd still give him a C at that point. They don't do anything, then this is an F. Like, you have to do something if you're the Cubs. You have to.
So the thing that's interesting to me is the big deal that they made this offseason was Counsell. And the narrative around it was, we're going to be all in. We're going to go spend this money and go win a World Series. They were in the Ohtani sweepstakes. And then when they didn't get Ohtani, now they've gotten like nothing.
So Ohtani played them like a fiddle. He played them like a fiddle.
So what's interesting is, again, like, the narrative around it was, now that we have Counsell, we've got this great manager, we're going to give him pieces around, when in reality, what they probably did was, we're going to overpay a manager who has dealt with small market teams for a long time, and we're going to give him a small market team to work with. Because at this point in time, that's what the Cubs roster looks like right now. I mean, these predictions, the idea that the Cubs, now again, they do have Counsell now, and if you want to make a claim that he's the reason they can take it over the top, who are we saying that they're a better team than the Brewers right now? I know the Brewers lost Corbin Burns and Woodruff. I understand that, and I've never been the biggest supporter of the moves that the Brewers make. But how are we convincing anybody right now that the Cubs are better than the Brewers?
I mean, if the Cubs stand pat with what they have right now, that's all we're going to go off of. I want to preface that now. They go out and sign a bat like Cody Bellinger, I think they're the favorite to win the NL Central. If they don't,
who's their best hitter? Ian Happ? Swanson, you have them. They still have bats there. You have Christopher Morel who rakes. Like, they have guys there. It's just like they're kind of like a team. They don't have a team identity without Bellinger. You miss that, like, middle of the lineup bat that, like, you can build the rest of your lineup around. Like, you need a bat like Bellinger. That's why I think you have to bet on Bellinger. I'm not the biggest Bellinger fan at all. I think regression is due. I think he had a really good year last year. I'll give him credit. I just struggle to see how he figured all of that out in 1 year and he's completely fixed. If he is, great. I hope they sign him to a good deal. But if he's not, then, like, I mean, you have just a ton of different issues. And now I will say, if he's not and the Cubs sign him to a big deal and it doesn't stop them from signing other guys, you had to do it. But the problem for me is that if you re-sign Cody Bellinger and he's not the same Cody Bellinger, and then you go and tell your fans, hey, we signed Cody Bellinger, we don't have the money to go sign a different guy the next year if Cody Bellinger's crap, like, now you tore down your window, right? Like, now you're saying, like, oh, we made the wrong move. We're not going to move past it. We're kind of stuck in this kind of limbo. And that's a problem for me. Like, you have to bet on Cody Bellinger coming back, or you have to go get a Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, Matt Chapman. Like, you have to sign somebody, one of these big names that's left. But until they do that, I'm not impressed with the Cubs. I am impressed with the Cubs offseason. They needed more. Yeah, well, the other thing too about the Cubs is, like you just said, it doesn't have to be Bellinger, because I'm not a big Bellinger guy either. But you need to do something to prove to the fans that you're serious about winning, and that's not hiring a manager. So if you didn't like, now Matt Chapman, don't even get me started about him. But if you want to prove to your fan base that you're interested in winning a World Series, then go make a move somewhere. Like you said, if it's Snell, it's Snell. If it's making a trade for, I mean, I just listened to David Stearns today say that Pete Alonso is going to be going to free agency in a year. Well, how would he look playing first base over there?
Yeah, and I mean, they have the prospects to do it too. They have a really good farm system. Dylan Cease, We'll take some of your prospects, Cubs. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll take some more back. Like,
yeah, he's another one.
They
You can't be afraid if you're the Cubs.
They have options. They have options on what to do. They have to do something. So we're great. When I look at this and say that they're overly graded as a C, it's how I'm judging their free agency right now and their moves they've made this offseason. They still have time left to salvage their offseason. But if this is the roster they roll into with the season, it's an F for me just because they had to have done more. I like the moves they made. It's just not enough. Like, you know what I mean with that, right?
They've gotten worse. Right now, they are worse than they were last year.
Yeah, even it's tough though because like they make a few moves, then it's like it's a really good off season for me. It's probably a B plus if they make a few good moves here before spring training. But if they don't, it's an F. Like, it's just such a wide range here for the Cubs that it's hard to grade before their season's over. And to give them a C just isn't. It's not a C right now.
That's fair.
All right. Well, that's all we have for this episode. Next week, baseball's back. We made it. Spring training's back. Hopefully we have some new baseball news to talk about. If not, we're going to start diving into some of the divisions, teams we like, teams, maybe we'll make some playoff predictions, some award predictions. We'll have a great episode next week. And then after that, spring training games start right around the corner. I'm sure everyone's excited for baseball to be back. So we appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.